and gentlemen, I'd like to reconvene our meeting today. Welcome to the Coeur d'Alene School District 271 workshop of April 18th, 2022. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
With us today for our workshop is Dr. Sean Hucker, Superintendent, Mr. Casey Morrisroe, Vice Chair, Ms. Leslie Bierke, Board Member, Ms. Heather Tenbrink, Board Member, Ms. Allie Anderton, Board Member, Ms. Lynn Town, Clerk of the Board, and I'm Rebecca Smith, Board Chair. No public comment will be accepted during this workshop. Comments may always be submitted to the board using trustees at cdaschools.org or through the clerk at any time. Thank you. We have two high school student body reports today, and so Venture and K-Tech are going to present to us.
On March 10th, Venture High School students were taken to the Kroc Center by Mrs. Pavlik and Mrs. Smotherman to spend the day learning about sources of strength. The peer leaders talked about the different parts of the sources of strength circle with the students, going into more detail about the meaning behind the words and why it is so important. The students then played interactive games, had thorough discussions, and elaborated on the meaning of sources of strength. Because of this field trip, students learned about how to destigmatize talks about suicide, bullying, and drug abuse, and how to handle the situation when presented with it. The students were selected because of their leadership skills and were encouraged to educate and model the traits they learned to other students.
We are sources of strength. That is cool.
On March 14th, Venture held a new student orientation that welcomed 23 new students into their family. During the orientation, the students were guided through hands-on activities where they experienced opportunities to explore their own ideas and assets and cultivated their planning skills. The activities included introductions to the CTE pathways and mastery-based learning. After 12 minutes, each student skipped to the next activity. They also learned about Venture's school expectations, 21st century advisory, attendance expectations, and other resources available. The orientation was set up to help familiarize students with their new environment before their first day on the 15th. Venture High School sets up an exhibit night after each trimester. March 10th, students were able to show growth to their parents, guardians, or guests. Students take 1 to 2 weeks on these projects, and they can often be combined between various classes, and many counted as their final grade for a class. Exhibit night brings students and their accomplishments to real life, and they get to show off what they've done. At Venture, it is very important to us that our students feel heard and are congratulated for their hard work. Students in the Venture High School Communication Graphics CTE pathway, along with a few K-Tech Media Graphics students, were given the opportunity to work with Stage Left Theater in Spokane and radio show host Molly Allen on their upcoming plays Spaceman and Broadway. Both plays were written by Molly Allen and premiered March 25th. 4 students designed playbill covers for the show, which were also used in various social media platforms. An equal amount of playbills with each of the cover designs were handed out during the show. 2 students chose to create a music video for Spaceman, and a QR code appeared in the playbill that allowed patrons to view at their leisure. The students' pictures and biography were featured inside of the playbill and on display during the run of the show. This collaboration gave students the opportunity to work with professionals in the field and showcase their talents to the community. On March 17th, family and friends all gathered in the Venture High School gym to celebrate teachers and students alike. Students got awards for attendance and GPA, and they were honored by getting up in front of their parents and peers to show their Venture pride. Alongside Venture's talented students, we also have amazing staff. One of our math teachers, Kevin Mahoney, was not only selected as Teacher of the Year for Venture, he was also selected as the overall High School Teacher of the Year for the district. Mr. Mahoney was chosen for this because of his love for his students in Venture High and because of how passionate and hardworking he is. He is kind to everyone he meets, and we couldn't think of a better person to have been picked for this award. After this amazing afternoon of fun and awards, students got to celebrate even longer with the St. Patrick's Day barbecue, once again thanks to our outstanding lunch staff. The day was full of enjoyment for everyone, and we thank the school board for coming to Venture to celebrate with us.
Thank you, Venture. And now I think we'll see and hear from K-Tech.
I am Wyatt Nelson, and I am in the welding program as a second year.
I'm Isaiah Hudlett, and I'm with the welding program at K-Tech as a second year.
I'm currently working on a window well cover for my principal back at Timberlake, Mr. Eberlin. I did the blueprint for it, took all the measurements and ordered the metal. And then I'm also working on the Humvee. It's a roll case for it. We got a new pipe bender, so we're learning to use that.
Currently we are working on TIG machines. We're learning how to do aluminum TIG and steel TIG. And then another just project that we are working on at the moment is a Humvee, and we're building the roll cage.
I started doing some Christmas ornaments for the class. We did those to raise money for our program, along with some roses for Mother's Day.
I chose the welding program because I work at a construction company at the moment. We do a lot of welding there, and I figured it'd be a great thing to learn and just to have that experience, and then I can eventually take it longer into the future.
I like to do projects that we work on, and then I also like to do SMA with 7018 and 6010.
After graduation, I'll be moving to Montana to do wildland firefighting, and then in the off season I'd like to come back to Coeur d'Alene and work for a company called Ground Force as a welder.
I plan on to continue my career at Idaho Forest Group as a millwright. Right now I'm doing a millwright apprenticeship, and then after that I'm going to NIC for the millwright program, and then probably going to be doing some oiling before I do millwright stuff.
Thank you for supporting K-Tech.
Thank you, K-Tech. Incredible learning happening at both of those schools. And some of our trustees and Dr. Hawker were able to visit K-Tech today for tours. And so it was a great day just to see all of that learning going on. Next up, we've got our district department updates, and we've kind of moved these updates to our workshops. And so this is our first one as we've kind of moved things around a little bit. And so we're going to hear from Jeff regarding operations. So thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, good afternoon, board. My name is Jeff Voller, and I'm the Director of Operations for the school district, and I am giving the operations update since operations is in my title. So I started with the Coeur d'Alene School District in the summer of 2018, and I've been the Director of Operations since I started. And a lot of people ask, what is operations? And I like to describe it as we are the behind-the-scenes functions that help keep our district running. So we support all the different programs so that we can just keep doing what we do for the students and the community in the district. Primarily, it's made up of 4 different departments. So the departments that I oversee are transportation. And you're going to hear from each of these departments individually, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on updates from each of these departments. But just to talk a little bit about what operations is and what I do on a daily basis. So I oversee transportation, facilities and maintenance, and that is made up of 3 different departments, including maintenance, grounds, and custodial. Nutrition services, serving all of our kids' lunches and breakfast. And then the School Plus program, that's our before and after school care program for families and students. I thought I'd actually spend a little bit more time on some of the functions outside of the specific programs that I work on. Manage construction projects. So I work on planning for the bonds and levies, the construction projects, putting out the bids and RFPs for those projects. In my time here, I was thinking about it today, I think I've run 8 different projects, from building Nexa to several of the security entrances remodels that we've done in the time here, and have successfully completed over $25 million in projects, from bonds, levies, and some other funding sources for the district in those 4 years. I just put a list of kind of some of the other roles that I do. I work on procurement, so that would be anything from school buses, vehicles, specialty equipment such as big heavy-duty lawnmowers that we buy. I work on procuring contracts, MOUs, and the different bids that we do. Special projects, an example of that would be the boundary redistricting that we did a couple of years ago. I work on the purchase and sales of land, work on with long-range planning. I manage the operational policies, so those are mainly the 8,000 and 9,000 policies that you guys oversee. I work on managing the deferred maintenance, and you're going to hear a report in a month on the deferred maintenance, so I won't go into great detail on that either, but we'll hear a little bit more in detail about that here coming up. I work with community partnerships, and a lot of that revolves around working with the cities to make sure that we have good working relationships with the cities. Working on safe paths for kids to get to school. For example, there is a flashing beacon that is going in on Best Avenue. You might have seen it when you came to Food Services today. For those of you that came to that tour, they were doing some construction there. That was actually the beginning of that RRFB is what it's called, but it's a flashing beacon where the kids can push the button and bright lights will flash so that kids can safely cross Best Avenue. That's being done in partnership with the city of Coeur d'Alene. So I manage projects such as that. A couple of those have been funded by Rotary, so we look for collaboration where we can, find additional funding sources for some of those things and find wins and partnerships in the community when we can. Also work with the Community Housing and Growth Issues Partnership through the City of Coeur d'Alene and Kootenai County, and I chair a subcommittee for that is responsible for education. So we're looking at, what would it look like for affordable teacher housing, but also what does it look like with growth and development and the impact that has on schools as we look for land, as we look for how do we fund construction to build new schools, and where does that funding come from? Those are some of the challenges that all of the school districts in this region are facing. And then I partner with other teams and departments within the Coeur d'Alene School District, including HR, finance, technology, and safety security, and meet with all those departments regularly. One of the other things that we do is we manage all the facility rentals, and we have 2 contract agencies that we work with. So the Recreation Department for the City of Hayden and the Recreation Department for the City of Coeur d'Alene. We have contracts with both of those entities to come in after school. So school ends, School Plus starts. As soon as School Plus kids move out, Parks and Rec comes into many of our school buildings. In addition to the Parks and Rec contracts, we have, here's a few statistics about Parks and Rec. So the City of Coeur d'Alene averages 2,340 hours a year of recreation use in our facilities, of indoor hours. And Coeur d'Alene has 30 hours of outdoor. If you compare that below to the City of Hayden, they have 750 outdoor hours of recreation use. A lot of people might ask, well, why such a big difference between indoor outdoor? If you think about the makeup of the City of Coeur d'Alene versus the City of Hayden, there are a lot more city-owned fields in the City of Coeur d'Alene. So they're managing most of their outdoor recreation on their own city-owned fields, where the City of Hayden uses our fields for Parks and Rec. If you ever go to Atlas on a Saturday in the springtime now, you're gonna see about 300 kids buzzing around in these little soccer games and just basically chasing a ball, and it's quite a kick to watch those kids that are 3, 4, 5 years old experiencing soccer for the first time, and Atlas is a big place that they do that. And then outside of the Parks and Rec groups, we have over 50 different unique user groups. Those are made up from music groups, arts and culture groups, different sporting groups in the community, and we average over 18,500 rental hours in our facilities, 14,000 outdoor hours, 4,500 indoor hours. With those amount of hours, I think the one thing those numbers tell is that space is at a premium, and this community could definitely use more recreation facilities. And it does create a challenge for us. One of the biggest challenges in our facility rentals is just how to find enough space and how to manage the different user groups that we have. For example, during the winter, the big competing groups are youth basketball and volleyball. And with the amount of gym space that we have available, we end up doing a lottery for that space, and we just don't have enough hours available in the day to accommodate all the requests that we have. So we end up doing a lottery. I have a facility coordinator, Renee Dempsey, that works under me, and she does a great job at managing all of our users in the different facilities. We use a program called School Dude that we use to manage the programs. And so schools have first choice. And so say there's going to be a fifth grade concert in the school on Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday evening, they'll make sure they put that in the schedule so that we know we can't book Parks and Rec for that day. But that's a program that we can use to manage the amount of volume of our own use as well as the community use that we have for our facility rentals.
Jeff?
Yes.
What kind of revenue are you generating from the rentals?
We generate about $60,000 to $70,000 a year through facility use rentals. And then, a couple other different unique challenges just, relating to that. I'm going to go to my next slide here. Our rates, indoor we charge $27 an hour, outdoor we charge $3.75 for 4 hours. We're probably a little light on the outdoor rentals. I think that's something maybe we need to take a look at. One of the things I see with that is we have some user groups that book up large blocks of time. Specifically, there's a soccer organization in town that uses it a lot, and we're happy to support that program. But they book out large blocks of time, and essentially almost buy out many of our fields. And so it's a challenge to coordinate with youth football, lacrosse, other soccer programs, and just make sure there's enough field space and time for all the users in the area. We do also offer, and I didn't put it up here, we offer in lieu, basically meaning if somebody wants to donate something to the district, in the equivalent of what the rental fee would be, we would consider that. So, for example, I know a couple youth symphonies that will buy music stands to use one of the indoor facilities. And so as long as it's equivalent to what their rental would be, they will donate those music stands, and then they can use the facility for free. Several baseball programs have come to us and said, hey, we want to rehab a field so that we can use that. And so they'll bring in special dirt for baseball and learn all kinds of stuff about baseball fields and all the intricacies and nuances behind those fields. But they'll bring in special dirt, they'll bring in clay to build up the mounds. Like there's all these special details that they want to do. And they're willing to donate those materials so that they can use the fields. And it's really a win-win for the community. It's a win for us, to offer that in lieu as well. So I just wanted to take a quick minute to highlight the facility rentals, because that's kind of a little bit of the really behind the scenes things that I do and that I work on. And then with that, I would just stand if you guys have any questions about operations in general for the district that I can answer for you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for the overview and all the details, and appreciate all that you do.
Yeah, there will be more to come on different departments over the next couple months. So we'll get into some of the specifics on some of those departments I mentioned as well. So
Terrific. Yep. Thank you. Great. We have a consent agenda today. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. We've also got items for information right there on our consent agenda items. Any questions on those for Dr. Hucker? No. All right. Moving on then, we are going to move into, and Dr. Hucker, I'll maybe turn this to you. Do you want to introduce the board docs demo, or who is?
You bet. They're on Zoom right there. Looks like it's Drew. And he's going to give us a brief little highlight of Board Docs. It is a recommendation that we switch from Board Book to Board Doc a little bit later, perhaps in the next couple of months. So we're ready to go by the July 1st new calendar year. Drew, are you up? Are you ready?
I'm here. Can you guys hear me all right?
You bet.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. It looks like I need to have access shared to me. It says disabled participant screen sharing. All right, let's see what we got. Can you all let me know if you can see my screen?
We sure can, Drew.
Okay. All right. Well, I just want to start off by saying thank you for allowing me to present to you all tonight. What we're going to be walking through here today is board docs. And I'm going to do a quick presentation just on the user-facing side. So if you can see here at this board docs URL, we can enter a public site, or we can also authenticate from the user side. That can be anyone from, board members, department teams, an admin team, you name it. And once we get on the back end, we can separate who has access to certain material and certain features. Now, how board docs is set up is typically with our customers, this URL will be hyperlinked on your current district website. So wherever you're currently hosting your agendas and minutes, we'll simply just hyperlink board docs here. And from the public side, we'll obviously enter the public site. For today's purposes, we're going to go ahead and authenticate. Each of your users will have their own username and login. So allow us to now view our secure information on the back end. What I've done is created just a little mock site for you guys to, get some transparency of how it could potentially look if we were using board docs. So as a board member, we're going to log into board docs. Board docs is cloud-based, so we can use this on a laptop, a tablet, a mobile device, and we also still can print any information that we do see throughout the demonstration today. On this featured page is where we typically see any of our most recent or maybe even an upcoming meeting. So we can see here that I did make a meeting for this evening. And this will now pull me into my meetings archive in board docs. The archive will be in by date, chronological order. And you can see here's our featured meetings, but very easy for us to click through each of our different month's meetings. And everything is keyword searchable as we go through today. So whether we're searching by meeting date, or we actually are inside the agenda here, we can view the agenda and keyword search inside that agenda. I notice you all are doing a live stream. You can actually post that live stream link directly on that meeting notice. And then if we are, God forbid, ever getting back to a virtual environment, you can also post a private, Zoom or WebEx meeting on that meeting date as well. So now to view the agenda, how will it be set up is we'll have our agenda items and categories on this left side. And then any of our supporting content, detail, or information is going to be found on the right side as we click through. So I can see here I have a March minutes approval. I'll click item 2A. Notice how it's pulled up that information for our minutes approval. Nice thing with board docs is we can tag our minutes that were generated in board docs. We don't have to attach those as a separate attachment. Everything's going to be done in one location. So here's our minutes, and everything that we're seeing, number-wise or minutes layout is completely customizable by your publishers. So those individuals that are responsible for creating agendas, creating our minutes, everything that we're currently seeing here is completely customizable. So pretty much just going to, mimic what you guys are currently doing and get it into the digital format here. I'm going to hit item 5B, approve of resignations. Notice that we have 3 levels of content here. We have public content, admin, and executive content. Anything that your publishers post in this public content here is what's going to be viewable on the public-facing side. Our executive content here is more often than not just board members. Obviously, we still have the rights to completely customize who can see executive content. And what we typically find in executive content is, student records. As we can see here, maybe some resignation letters, or if we have new hires, we have some resumes in here. So very easily can attach any of our attachments. Just going to pull up a separate tab while also keeping our agenda up. The nice thing with board docs on the publishing side is there's no limit on files that we include per one agenda item. There's no file type limit, so PDF, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, you name it. So you'll never run out of room here in board docs, and it'll also show you on the left side with this little paper symbol if there is an attachment related to that specific agenda item. So again, nothing too fancy going on here. Again, we can keyword search in the agenda. If we're in our meetings tab, we can keyword search for a particular meeting, or if we're not sure what meeting a certain topic took place, we can also do a full site search and actually specify what we're looking for in here. Board Docs is one of the very few solutions where you can actually keyword search in any of your included attachments. So that search engine really does come in handy, obviously for the public for transparency, as well as for the board. Being able to pull up, previous information, even if you guys are in session, we have everything at our fingertips here. We can also find our minutes on Board Docs. It shows add minutes because I'm listed as a publisher on my demo site, but for a normal user, we'll see view minutes here. And then if you all are recording your live streams or recording videos of your board meetings, you can actually post that video stream here as well. I'll go back to a pretty old meeting just to quickly show you all. This also allows you to timestamp the agenda items. Really good for public transparency. If our public members, weren't able to attend or didn't join your live stream, they can come into Board Docs here and select that specific agenda item, and it's actually going to fast forward them to that portion of your meeting. That's pretty much it as far as the meeting side goes in Board Docs. So not only can we have our agendas and minutes in here, we can also reference our policy book. I'll give my Wi-Fi a second here to buffer for me. So we can get all of our policies in Board Docs, and I think the really nice thing with this is, one, we're thinking of public transparency. So as we adopt or retire or make revisions to particular policies, that cloud base comes in handy because as our publishers and as our board approve policies or approve agenda items, everything that we create in Board Docs is going to refresh right away. So if we do update a policy during a meeting and we make that change, the public's going to see that update right away. We're not going to have to, take our policy from a Word to PDF, then post on the site. Again, just one fluid motion. I like to say a one-stop shop for anything board or district related as far as agendas, minutes, and policies go. Can also keyword search our policy book. And then you can also separate different policy books as well. We see everything from, district policies to maybe employee handbooks, you name it. So no limit on the amount of policy books and no limit on the amount of policy items that we have. So pretty much set up just like the agenda is. So that's pretty much it as far as the functionality in the light version. I also do want to mention that Board Docs is partnered with Idaho School Board Association. So not only will you have Board Docs support, you also have the association support with anything Board Docs related. We offer unlimited support and training throughout your subscription. Even if it's a one-off user, a particular board member wants some refreshing training, they can come in here, log in, and go to our Board Docs help option. We do offer 24/7, 365 support. I like to say they're scary good. I'm not joking. You can call them at 2 a.m. The night before a board meeting, and someone will answer the phone. They're very, very good. And then we also just kind of have a how-to guide on the back end. So again, limited support and training throughout the subscription, 24/7 support team as well for any questions that we may have. And just pushed 10 minutes, so apologies if I was talking a little bit quick, but that's all I have for you guys this evening.
Great. Thanks, Drew. I think we have a couple questions here.
Okay.
Hi, Drew. Casey Morstro. Is there in the meeting, when you're looking at the agenda items and clicking on an attachment, I see the pen up there. So are you able to make notes and those sorts of things on the document?
Not in the LT version. You can in our Pro version, but the LT version you cannot make annotations.
Hi, this is Heather Tinbrink. I had a question about the changeover. So, you're showing us the back record we can keep of previous year's minutes. Where would we end up with two different systems as we switch, or would the last several years transfer, or how would that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if we were to leave Board Book, they are required by law to provide any of your information. With customers that have switched in the past, they typically provide that as PDFs. And during implementation, our training staff is going to get any of your previous content loaded into Board Docs for you. So we're not going to necessarily start from scratch. It will be, however, in a PDF format. But with our keyword search, we can still keyword search by meeting date, and we can also still keyword search by included attachments. So as far as any previous content that you guys have, whether that's agendas, minutes, video, or policies, we'll be able to get all of that past content into the system here during initial startup.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thanks, Drew. Dr. Hucker, quick question for you. When are you seeing this come before us again, or will it? Or maybe now that we've seen it, remind me of the time.
There is an implementation timeline, and it takes a little bit to get things set up, get passwords set up. As you know, we've got a new board clerk coming on board later this week, in fact. So our hope would be to vet this out additionally and bring it to you at your May school board meeting as a consent agenda item. This board books, I believe, don't quote me exactly on this, but I think it's around $2,300 a year that we pay for board books. And board docs, this program right here, is closer to $27. So there's a $400 or $500 increase in costs to go with this service. However, there's just many pluses, and again, Drew had to be quick at my request as we're presenting this, but some of the policy search options as we're researching various policies to update ourselves, we can have access to search policies across the entire country that other school districts that participate can do. And then, of course, you just spent a lot of time the last couple of years getting all of your policies to be searchable. Board Docs does that, and so I think moving forward, it's just super easy. I've noticed that the way we're currently using Board Book is a little clunky for some trustees. We're really using PDFs and things more so than the actual program. And even myself, I find it's just when I open screens, I'm limited. I have to try to pinch and zoom to see things. So I just think you'd be more efficient in those meetings by making the switch. So our hope is that you would approve that at your May board meeting, and then we could get to work, and hopefully by June or July we'd be ready to go with using this as our new platform.
Terrific. Thank you.
Dr. Hawker, just real quick, I would agree board books got a little clunky. There used to be an app program that it was much more user-friendly, in my opinion, for the trustees because of some of the highlight features and, making notes and those sorts of things. I'd be curious what the difference is between the Lite and the Pro version that Drew said, at least the way that I've used board documents over the last 6 or 7 years. That's been my way to do it. Before we had the iPads and had the app, I used to just download the whole PDF onto a computer and make all those notes and stuff. So to me, that's a useful feature, but
I would agree
that
there are some big benefits to their enhanced version. I'm sure Drew could talk on it, but I know we don't have a lot of time, but I know for me too, going with their Pro, their bigger package, I think it's called the Pro package, it allows you to have unlimited meetings essentially. So we could use it. Right now we run in all of our cabinet meetings and various meetings, we just use a shared Google Doc that just keeps, we put that whole year in there and we just keep adding on a new meeting. You could do that right here within Board Docs. And then of course it's all searchable for years to come as new people come on board. It's very easy to go back and find those. But of course Google does the same thing. So we've been making it work, but there is a lot of benefits to that. And if you like to be able to take some notes during your meetings and annotate on those meetings, we can certainly get you that information as well.
Great. That'd be helpful. Thanks. Thank you, Drew. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you guys so much. Have a good night.
Yeah, have a good night. All right, I'd like to introduce then Eric Herringer, who's going to share with us about bond capacity. And we're really glad you're here, Eric, and thanks in advance.
Yeah, you bet. Review items, and I think I can derive this presentation from over here. Is that right? You go page up, page down.
You can advance with your arrows right there.
Okay. Good. All right. So I have been coming to the Coeur d'Alene School Board meetings for probably 15 years, if not more. And particularly in the last 10 or so, come around this time to kind of review your bonds and levies as you go through the budget setting process. And just kind of do an overview of how bonds and levies work in Idaho. And I know there's some new board members. And so I've kind of expanded this presentation out to cover a fair amount of material. So the first thing I'm going to go through some background and historical data, and then we'll get into some more specifics about planning for the future. But to be clear about what my role is with the district, I am under contract as your municipal advisor. And that in my regulatory environment means that I have a fiduciary role to the district. When you ask me questions and I'm providing advice and analysis, my job is to make sure I'm doing that in a fiduciary capacity, which is to give you advice that's in your, what I think is, based on your criteria in the best interest of the school district. My primary role is to work on bond issues. But because I work on bond issues in Idaho, I have to work on other levy items, and I, kind of have an expertise with the different types of levies. You're not really considering, at least I understand, at this meeting or in the current planning, a bond issue. But when the time comes to do a bond issue, there are other people involved. There's going to be bond counsel, the attorney firm that's going to write the ballot language and then write up all the documents related to the offering of the securities. And then there's another firm, an underwriting firm, that would actually be brokering the bond sale. So to be clear, municipal advisor, I'm not going to be selling your bonds. I'm going to give you advice on what to do with your bonds when the time comes. So to go through the levy basics, there's 3 different types of voted levies in Idaho. And the most common voted levy is a supplemental maintenance and operation levy. It's what school districts use to go into the general fund to supplement what the state provides for basic education. It adds to whether it's additional money to pay salaries, additional money for special programs, whether that's music, arts, you name it, the supplemental M&O provides those additional dollars beyond what the state provides. They're 2-year levies, so the maximum you can have is up to 2 years. It's the cash flow to the district, the money comes in through the property tax collection cycle. You get it from the county in 2 big chunks a year, end of January, end of July, and again, use that money into the general fund. It is the use of funds is very flexible. You can use it for just about anything. You could even do a supplemental levy to build a new school. The problem is you'd have to generate whatever that new school costs over a 2-year period, which I've never seen a district do. One key provision here is that school districts can request a permanent supplemental levy if, for the last 7 consecutive years, the supplemental levy is equal to 20% or greater of your general fund revenue. And I know a couple of years ago, this was a discussion item for the district to think about whether the district did qualify, and I think still does qualify under that supplemental levy being 20% of your general fund revenue. So it is something that could be considered. It requires a simple majority to approve the permanent, and that it authorizes a specific dollar amount, not a rate. So if you do a permanent supplemental, you'll be frozen at a dollar amount, and not a tax rate that would grow as market value grows. There are a handful of districts that have permanent supplemental levies in Idaho. Lake Pend Oreille's most recent up in Sandpoint a couple, 3 years ago. Moscow, Blaine County. There's also some districts have things that look like permanent supplementals but aren't. The Boise School District has a charter levy that is a rate-driven levy. I believe Blaine County and McCall also have what's called the budget stabilization levy. A little bit different, not voted, but kind of a permanent funding source from a local standpoint.
Eric?
Yep.
So those are permanent perpetuity forever until they were rescinded? I suppose a board could remove it?
I suppose a board could. They're permanent authorizations. We'd have to get a lawyer to talk about any of the technical, but a board could decide not to levy the full amount. If you, for example, you're at 20 million, your supplemental levy, and you got that permanent, and you could get to a point 5 years from now where you said, well, let's just back off and only do 15. It doesn't reset you at 15. It just and it's not like you could recapture it, but you could leave it on the table. Yep. And there are districts that like Moscow, their permanent supplemental levy every 5 to 7 years they'll take it out to vote to increase it. But if it gets shot down, they still have the baseline, right? But then they can kind of keep up with inflation and growth. There's the opportunity to go out and increase it. Bond levy is a different type of voted levy. It is what school districts use to build buildings. It's for capital items. When you have a bond vote, it does two things. It authorizes a school district to incur debt and then levy a property tax to repay that debt, principal and interest. And the authorization of the debt is a constitutional issue. In Idaho, under the Idaho Constitution, no public entity, city, county, school district can incur long-term debt beyond 1 year without a 2/3 approval. So if you're going to take a bond out, part of that vote is to approve the debt. And then with that comes the ability to levy the property tax to pay it back. So requires a 2/3 supermajority. When you get a bond passed, you sell the bonds up front, you get the money up front, you build your building, and then you levy the tax to repay the principal and interest. The maximum term on a bond in Idaho is 30 years. Most districts do 20 or less. Coeur d'Alene has in the last 2 tries, I think, done 15 or 13, or 15 and 13. So you can always do shorter, but 30 years is the max. The limit on the amount is 5% of full market value. I've got some numbers on that, and that's just the legal debt capacity that you can go up to. The state does have a couple programs to help with bonds. The state currently does not provide money directly for school construction. Some of the surrounding states do. What Idaho does is says, school district, you go get the bond passed to build your building, and then we'll provide some money to help offset the cost of the property tax levy that you need to repay that bond, and that's through that bond levy subsidy. And then there's also the school bond guarantee program, which basically gives you the state's credit rating when you sell bonds. So it's like having your, rich uncle co-sign on your loan. But this Coeur d'Alene School District already has a really good bond rating, so it helps you a little, but not a lot.
Eric, on that, I believe Idaho is maybe the only or one of 2 states that provides no state funding for buildings and requires a 2/3 supermajority. Is that?
Well, I can tell you that
close?
there's only one other state that requires a 2/3 supermajority, and that is Kentucky. And I don't know if they provide money directly for school construction, so I can't say for certain whether, but it is.
I think I've heard that along the way.
Yep. So the third type of voted levy is a plant facility levy, and it is kind of a hybrid. It is for capital items like a bond, but it's more of a pay-as-you-go levy. So like the supplemental levy, if you pass a plant levy, the money comes in through the property tax collection cycle, and then you use those monies for capital items. It's usually for major maintenance or upgrades to existing facilities, replace HVAC units, re-roof buildings, things like that. Plant levy can be for up to 10 years. So where the supplemental levy is 2 years of funding, plant levy can be up to 10. And the voter approval requirement depends on what the tax rate is that's necessary to generate the dollars you ask for. You would probably, in most circumstances in Coeur d'Alene, be looking at a 55% approval requirement, which, the difference between that and 2/3 is pretty substantial. You again levy the dollars, they come in, you use them to do the capital projects. There is the ability to finance a new facility through a lease purchase. In Idaho, we can do what's called annual appropriation lease purchase, which means that you would potentially build a new school building and enter into a lease purchase agreement to acquire that facility on an annual appropriation basis. So it's not long-term debt, because each year the school board makes the decision to budget the money to lease the building. And you could get 5 years in and decide not to, and then be evicted from the building. So point being, there is the ability to finance through a plant levy, particularly in a district like Coeur d'Alene, where your tax base is so significant that you can generate some pretty significant dollars with a plant levy. And I'll get into some more detail on that a little bit later. So again, just kind of as a summary, 3 different types of voted levies: bond, plant, and supplemental. And I think we covered pretty much what we need to cover there. Looking at the election history for Coeur d'Alene, this goes back to 2011, which is when the state consolidated the election dates, and so we have good records on election results. 2011, there was a supplemental levy with sort of 2 amounts. So there was the 7.8 million and 5 million. I think, there was sort of the base package and then some additional. That passed, and then in 2013, 2 years later, renewed for 14 million, and then 2015, 17, 18, or I'm sorry, 17. So every 2 years, you've been going out for the supplemental levy. In each case, it has passed. You're now at the $20 million amount, and that's been the case for the last 2 cycles. Bond levies in 2012 for 32.7 million, 13-year payback, and then a 2017 bond at 35.5 million with a 15-year payback term. So good success passing levies in Coeur d'Alene. That translates into, this is your existing fiscal year 2022, the amounts you've levied for property taxes, 20 million for the supplemental. That is authorized through next year. So you'll be able to certify 20 million for the fiscal 2023. And if you want to renew it, you'll need to do that probably in March of 2023. There's no plant levy currently. The bond levy is roughly 4.8 million, and the bond, the debt service goes out, the final payment on your existing bonds goes out to 2031. There's 2 other levies that are not voted. The tort levy is just sort of a levy that's used to pay some insurance. I think it's, I can't remember what type of insurance it's used. Property and liability insurance. And that's basically subject to a 3% increase. And so it's sort of an automatic 175,000. It's not a big amount. And then an emergency levy is something that districts have access to if you have enrollment growth. And so each year, the school district says if we have year-over-year enrollment growth and there's some startup costs for additional, whether it's educational materials, additional teachers, just sort of ramping up for more kids, districts qualify to levy an emergency levy subject to board approval. So I think most years, if you have enrollment growth, you can consider that emergency levy around sometime in August and September when you get your enrollment counts. You currently don't have one. So that all adds up to just under 25 million. This is a chart of what the overall property tax levy amount has been going back the last 10 years. So you've seen growth from 2013 to 2022. It's been pretty moderate increases the last 3 or 4 years. And, I can't read it from this far away, but I can read it from here. Last year, the prior year, you're at 24.6 million, and this year at just under 25 million for property tax levy. And again, that's the combined amount: bond, supplemental, tort. In terms of the tax rates, the levy rate per thousand, that's impacted by growth in your market value. So you certify dollars to be levied to the county looks at the market value, does the calculation of what the tax rate needs to be to collect those dollars, and your historical tax rates are listed there. And they've dropped because your market value has been growing pretty substantially. So in 2017, when the last bond passed, the commitment, or the projection, if you will, I can't consider it a commitment because we projected that if you pass the bond, it won't increase the tax rate. And you can see from 2017 to 18, the tax rate stayed right at 232, dropped a penny. And then in 2019 dropped, and it's basically gradually your levy rate has been coming down to where now you're at adult. We use the term rate per thousand, so you're at $1.56 per thousand of market value, which means for every $100,000 of market value, it's $156. So we can translate it out that way. I talked about why the rate's going down. It's because the market value is going up. Your 20-year compound growth rate for your market value in the district is 7.66%. And that goes over, a 20-year cycle where we actually saw a drop in market value during the last recession. But you can see since 2013, when we came out of the real estate recession, the market values have been growing pretty strong with double-digit growth the last 4 years. I peel out urban renewal tax value just because that's sometimes treated separate from the district's tax market value. But the way things work currently, you get the revenue that's generated from the urban renewal agency for your levies comes to the district. It doesn't go to the urban renewal agency. In terms of where that puts the district by comparison in Region 1, you can see the numbers are there. There's a pretty big spread in Region 1 because you've got Mullen at the far end at $8.59 per thousand, and then dropping all the way down to Kootenai 274 at 99 cents. That might not be as meaningful as what the other thing I put together was the comparing to the 20 largest districts in the state, which perhaps is a little bit more instructive, where you're at the lower end because your tax basis. It doesn't mean you aren't collecting as many dollars as everyone else. It just means your tax base is really large. Post Falls has a slightly lower tax rate, but you're second lowest of the 20 largest districts in the state. Statewide average is $2.46 per thousand. So substantially below the statewide average. Another way to look at this, because someone might say, well, wait a second, if our tax rate's really low, maybe we're not getting enough dollars. But if you look at this comparison, which is the levy dollar per student, you're actually a little bit above the statewide average, which is $2,046, where Coeur d'Alene's at $2,452, and that's just based on fiscal 2022 levy amount, and that's total levy amount. That's not your supplemental. It's your supplemental, your bond, your tort, it's everything. Is what we're comparing there to the enrollment for this year. Okay. And another way to look at this is to look at median home values. And so what I did here is basically in Idaho, as a taxpayer, your tax bill is based on your market value as according to the assessor as of January 1 of the tax year. So we're in the current tax year we're in right now is tax year 2021. That translates to your fiscal year 2022 revenue. And that market value is based on January 1 of 2021. So it's already more than a year old. But I went on Zillow, just got the median home value for the Coeur d'Alene metro area. And, so you see that it's $425,000 for 2021. There's a homeowner's exemption of $125,000. So the net taxable value for an owner-occupied home would be $300,000. Your tax rate of 0.00156 translates into $468 in property tax on the median home value. Compare that to 2019, and home value is less, homeowner's exemption was less, taxable value of $224,000, a higher tax rate, about 0.00196. And then, so the median home value or median tax bill was $439. So you can see the percentage increase, 30% increase in home value, taxable value increased almost 34% because the homeowner's exemption is not keeping up, and your tax rate went down 20%. So net, over a 2-year period, the tax bill increased about 6%. Okay. I'm now going to kind of get into future planning, review of your existing bond structure. And so from those two bond elections, this is what remains outstanding. You've got 37.9 million of bonds outstanding. The first one, let's look at the Series 2012B. It pays off in 2025, and you can see that in the chart below. It has a call feature, which is the optional redemption date of September 15, 2022. That's an important feature because we've used it actually to pay down some of the district's debt early. And that's why when you look at that chart, the payments in 2022 are about 4.8 million, which is your levy, and then it drops to somewhere more like 4 million and then goes back up. Well, that's because a couple of years ago, the district used some money that had built up in the bond fund to defease bonds, which means set the money aside to pay them off early when the call feature rolls around this year. So you've already set money aside to make those payments that would have otherwise been in 23, 24, and 25. The 2017 bond goes out to 2031 final maturity, and it's got a call date not until March of 2027. So you don't have a lot of debt relative to the size of your tax base. It pays off within the next 10 years, and the annual payments are generally level with a little bit of a drop in the next 3 years. Thinking about next year, so in Idaho, the law, the Idaho Code section that says how much you can levy to repay your bonds is covered in this 33802A. I'm not going to read that information, but what it basically says is that you can levy for up to 21 months worth of bond payments, less what you have in the bank. So we go through and I do the calculation on the right-hand side there, add up the amount of bond payments over the next 21 months, starting with from July 1st of the fiscal year, and it adds up to 8.7 million. Now, I run through a cash flow projection, and when you go to certify in September, it looks like you'll have roughly 3.2 million in the bank in your bond fund. And that's money that has to stay in the bond. It's been collected to repay the bonds. It's there. It can't go anywhere else but to pay bonds. And then a little bit of money from the state through that levy equalization program I talked about 127,000. So after we subtract that from the 8.7 million, the most you could levy is right around 5.3 million. You levied 4.8 million this year. So I wouldn't, that's not, you're probably going to levy about 4.8 million next year. You could bring it down, you could increase it a little bit, but that's not restricting you in terms of what you can levy to repay your bonds. Now I bring that up because you have that money built up in the bond fund, one of the things you could do is take some of that, because that 2012B bond is callable this September. You could use, if you look at that bond levy recommendation there at the bottom, you could use about 2 million to pay off the 2025 maturity. So you can just call that, pay it off early, and that would save about $240,000 of interest cost to your taxpayers. Or you could just leave it in the bank and not do that. In my opinion, it's sort of, you've got the money, you could pay it off and save interest, and it won't hurt your cash flow in your bond fund. Another option is you could lower the levy next year and spend down some of that reserve, but then you just have to raise it back up the following year. And so your kind of taxes would do a little bit of a zigzag. Most districts I work with, I would advise to do what I'm advising here, which is to call the bonds with that reserve money and save the interest cost. And that's effectively what we did in 2018, where we had some money built up in the bond fund, 2.5 million, used it in the same way, and that saved about 350,000 in interest cost for the district, which is why we've got that little carve out a few pages back. That little carve out there is the savings on that interest cost.
So if we didn't do that, what happens to that money? Is it just?
It's there to pay bonds. So if you just do nothing and get out to the last year, we go through that calculation and you just levy a lot less.
Because there's money sitting there towards
right.
the,
Yeah.
okay.
Because when we get to the end, you know, that money's got to go to pay bonds. You can't get transferred over to the general fund.
And can it only go to pay that 2012 bond?
It can go to pay either.
It can, okay.
Yeah, I should restate that. I know the district keeps the two bond, a lot of districts just have one bond fund, but I know Coeur d'Alene keeps them separate. So we'd probably have to look at, you know, how much can go to this one and how much can go to that one. But I've always believed that you can put them towards either.
Okay.
Any questions on that debt profile? I did mention this earlier about the bond levy equalization program. This is the state program where, you know, the state says, hey, we'll help you out by giving you, you know, sending you some money each year to help offset the property tax levy to repay your bond. We're not going to provide money directly for school construction. It's not a big amount. It's in the name. It's the school bond levy equalization, and what it tries to do is equalize so-called poor districts from wealthy districts, defined as tax base, really. And because your tax base is so large, you don't receive very much money. You've received about $1 million over the last 7-8 years. It's not, again, not a lot. What you're basically getting is 10% of the interest cost is what the state's kicking in. Some districts get 20% of the principal and interest, which is a much bigger number, obviously. And the reason, you know, the reason for why you're getting the minimum subsidy is because of the way the formula works. It's basically a 3-part formula that you probably can't read on the screen, but 50% of that formula is your market value per support unit. So it's basically how big is your tax base per kid. And again, you have a very large tax base relative to the number of students, and that's what's driving your subsidy to the kind of minimum amount. The other two components of the formula are the unemployment rate in the county compared to the statewide average and the per capita income in the county compared to statewide. So it's all compared to statewide averages. And trying to think of a district up here that would receive a lot. Most of the districts in Kootenai County are large, so there's not really a lot of subsidy that gets paid up here. Okay, future levy planning. Your debt capacity is 5% of full market value. So when I talk about full market value, we add back the homeowner's exemption. So rather than the 15 million that's your taxable value, it's billion, 17.5 billion plus the urban renewal value of 1.1 billion, 18.6, 5% of that is $932 million of debt capacity. And then you subtract what you have outstanding, some adjustments for what you'll pay off this year. Bottom line, you're just shy of $900 million of debt capacity. And that's the legal definition of debt capacity under Idaho code. It's not what I would consider practical debt capacity. Practical debt capacity is what you can pass at 2/3 supermajority, which really has a lot more to do with what's the taxpayer impact. But there are districts in the state that don't have the debt capacity to do the types of projects they want to do. You don't have that problem. The plant levy is kind of intriguing for Coeur d'Alene. Historically, if you go back 20, 25 years, the district used to run plant levies on a 4-year cycle and then use those dollars to build schools. Again, because you have a large tax base, you could bring in some pretty significant dollars with the plant levy. And what the district did is basically authorize a 4-year plant levy at $2 per thousand tax rate, because that's what is required for a 55% approval. And that was generating $5-6 million, and you add that up over 4 years, and back then you had enough money to build an elementary school. The district went away from that plan in right around 2010-11 when it started thinking about a bond, and that's when that 2012 bond came around. But if you look at the 55% approval is for voter approval on the plant, that's the level as long as the combined bond and plant levy rate is below 0.002 or $2 per thousand. So the way to make the calculations easy, I just take the 0.002 times your taxable market value, which is 15.9 billion. You do the math, and your maximum annual tax collection for bond and plant is just shy of 32 million. Your bond levy is 4.8 million. So what's left is what you could do for a plant levy on annual collection at 55%, and that's 27 million. So you think about 27 million per year over 10 years is a lot of money, right? It's 270 million. I'm not suggesting that's what you're going to do, but that kind of gives you an idea of, at a 55% threshold, the kinds of dollars you could generate for capital items if need be. And speaking of, just some generic levy calculations. So I just went through and said that for a levy amount of $1 million, so $1 million increase to your supplemental levy or $1 million plant levy would result in a tax rate of 6 cents per thousand. That would also mean, or translate to, for every $100,000 of market value, $6.03, or for every $1 million of tax value, which there's certainly some $1 million homes in this community, $63 per million to generate a $1 million levy. Does that make sense? So 5 million. It's pretty easy to extrapolate, but 5 million is a 31 cent per thousand levy rate, or $31 per 100,000, and then 10 million, double that, 63 cents per thousand. So if you look down below, plant levy requires 55% approval if the amount's below 27 million. A $10 million annual plant levy would support a lease purchase financing of 81 million. So if you were thinking about capital projects and you said, okay, well, how much can we do? That gives you a little bit of an idea. A $10 million levy per year for 10 years at 4% interest would support a lease purchase of about an $81 million project. If you went the bond levy route, where you can go out to 20 years, and I just kept the interest rate the same at 4%, which is probably a little higher than it is currently, you could do a project of about 136 million. And that 63 cent per thousand increase would still would take you from, if you add that to the $1.56 you're at now, that takes you to $2.19, and that's still below the statewide average tax rate, which if I recall was $2.46. So food for thought there. And finally, it wouldn't be a presentation that I would give without having a graph on interest rates. Interest rates have gone up. If you haven't, most people are aware of that because of, with the inflationary pressures in our economy and the Fed's effort to try to fight inflation. We have seen interest rates increase dramatically since the first of the year. It's almost shocking. I've never seen rates go up kind of in that straight line at the far right-hand side of the page. But what's interesting is that we're still below the overall interest rate levels that we saw 5 to 10 years ago. Now, I suspect that interest rates are going to continue to climb up, but this is pretty shocking to see how quickly rates have climbed over the last 3 to 4 months. Where they go from here, we'll find out. I'm hoping they moderate, but I'm not sure if I can pin my hopes on that. So that's the end of the presentation. I hope I've covered information that's helpful to you, and happy to stand for any questions.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Any questions right now? No. A lot of great information, Eric, for us to continue to ponder and to kind of set the stage as we move into this next.
I'm here to help.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it so much.
Bye-bye.
Right. We're going to welcome Shannon Johnston then to give us our budget overview. So,
let's see, still on. Well, happy tax day. Kind of fitting to go into now a JFAC budget update after a bond update. So thanks so much to Eric. I think he woke up at 4 in the morning to be here with us. So really appreciate that. So for the agenda for my time is we're going to review kind of just some major budget updates from kind of this time last year when we started the 2022 budget process. And then we're going to do analysis of kind of the current JFAC appropriations and budget. And as a reminder, JFAC stands for the Joint Finance Appropriations Committee. Pretty much the legislative team, House representatives, Senate representatives, they hold the budget meetings. They set the budget for education and all of the state departments. And then it goes to the House, Senate for approval. And then ultimately the governor signs the bills or vetoes them. And then kind of a budget timeline to remind us where we're at right now and what the next couple months are going to look like. Okay, so it's been a short year, I'm sure. Rebecca and Casey, it feels like only yesterday that you're doing the last budget adoption. Last year we started in March where JFAC set the budget for 2022. And then during May, I'll just skip forward. May, we had our big fourth round of COVID funding, the biggest one yet out of ESSER 3, $13.5 million total, and a portion of it was for learning loss, so 2.7, and the other portion was more discretionary, less restrictions of 10.8. And then during the budget subcommittees and budget adoption, the district allocated $4.3 million of ESSER 3 and the combination of ESSER 2 to offset our deficit. Oh, and just a reminder for March, when JFAC set their budget, it was based off of ADA funding, not enrollment. So then along came June, we had our budget hearing, adopted our budget, and then also at that budget adoption, the board also approved a classified salary increase, about totaling $750,000. And then after that adoption, when we got into the fall, the board approved IBB, the interest-based bargaining, the settlement agreement, so awarding steps and lanes to our certificated staff, about $1.08 million. And then about a couple months ago, we got some great news. There was a temporary rule from the state that we were going to be based off of enrollment instead of ADA. We were kind of scared there for a little while. It would have been, it's kind of a $3 million difference if we were off of ADA of 480 support units. And then also kind of the question of would there be a big piece of freeze, meaning that the appropriations wouldn't cover what actual support units were for the state, and then that way they would have to reduce our discretionary. And I have some good news for that. So now we're at the JFAC appropriation. There's a lot of numbers. We're not going to go through all these, but it is good to see maybe on some nice light reading at night just where we have been for the just kind of a comparison of our years. So your first column, we're going to see our 1920 budget allocation, and these are state numbers. These are not Coeur d'Alene numbers. The pre-COVID, so what it looked like when the state was adopting before all the crazy. And then the fiscal year 21 revision, once we hit COVID, and definitely cuts. What we started off this year with our original adoption, and then the JFAC just kind of revised the budget for this current year, along with what we're going to see for next year. And there's a percentage column of what we've seen in either decreases or increases. It's important to note that I have factored in the support unit increase for the state, because the state support units actually have increased by about, I believe it's 6%. So it's just factoring in what the true comparison would be, reducing that support unit. So I highlighted some pretty big items to note. First one is leadership premiums. The state will not be funding leadership premiums anymore. So those are our leadership stipends, a little more than $600K. So they decided to use that to fund their state insurance plan, the buy-in option. And then our second big highlight is the huge increase in literacy funding. And that was kind of an alternative to doing a full day kindergarten bill. So the governor's increased by almost 162% with the intention that we could fund full day K, which we already have. So it's going to help contribute to our current deficit and what the general fund pays for full day K. And then two big things that we're kind of continue to monitor is if you see that the technology budget and IT staffing, if you look at fiscal year 20, we're still really down in IT funding, yet the expectation, especially with COVID and just, as we grow, we continue to rely more and more on technology and online learning. They are still keeping those cuts the same. And then kind of our last big hurrah is our discretionary funding, a huge increase, about 26% if you factor in support unit increase and looking at 1920. And that, we'll get into that a little bit. So overall, 14% increase for state appropriations, which is kind of incredible, some great news and that the state has done. All right, and then just a kind of a pie chart to represent the big portions of state funding. So you'll see that the pink piece is our discretionary funding. So that's based off of a per support unit amount. And then you'll see the green, orange, and that big blue pie chart. It's more than 50% of state funding, and that's all based off of our salary-based apportionment. So for discretionary, a huge change, just looking at that trend increase. There was tons of talk with the increases for the state insurance plan. A lot of bills went back and forth. Remember in March, we were talking about, okay, would we have to use it specifically on health insurance, which we were in a great place because we could cover that, our 100% of our general fund health insurance with that discretionary. They kept it simple in the end and then just boosted discretionary. So probably $6,000 more per support unit for discretionary. So a great news for us that's going to help us balance our budget. All right, and next we'll go to the big changes for salary-based apportionment. For certificated, there's just going to be that statutory career ladder increase that we saw a couple of years ago, just slight increases, either like less than 1% to a little more than 1%. And I think the big headlines you might have been hearing just throughout media articles is a 7% increase for admin and classified salaries. Just a reminder, that is the 7% that increase on the base salaries that they use for the funding formula. It doesn't translate into how much we actually, our actual cost. Just for classified, it's currently $23,000 and change per classified FTE, and it's 7% is go at 24 something. So obviously our classified salaries, the average would be $35,000. So you can see classified, our SBA revenues only cover 60% of general fund costs. For administrators, it only covers 71%. And then for certificated, for the general fund, it covers 85%. So it's still not, the revenue's not caught up on our actual costs. So always a big disclaimer that even though we're getting 7% in revenues, we can't translate that to 7% in salary increases. All right, and then another huge headline is K-3 literacy funding. A pretty significant estimated cost. State Department of Ed actually gave out just estimated per student, the per student funding for us to help calculate the cost. So currently we're getting $864,000 for K-3 literacy. And now there's kind of a bit of a Frankenstein formula. They reinvented the formula. 50% is based off of our K through 3 enrollment. So and the state has recommended $370 per the K through 3 enrollment. So that translates to a little less than 1.5 million. So already more than our current allocation. And then the other 50% of the funding formula gets a little confusing is they're looking at ISAT growth, specifically students who move up a tier or remain at proficient. So I'm being kind of conservative. The SDE, the State Department recommended $480 per student. And with the help with Dr. Nelson, we just looked at what our current proficient is. Didn't want to get too risky and see what tier growth might be. But and then there's also a weighted average of 0.75 if that student qualifies for free and reduced lunches. So you take that 0.75 weighted and then our count for our students who are at proficient, and now that's a little less than 1.3 million. So we're looking at 2.8 million based off of the State Department's formula, which I mean is pretty incredible, the increase. All right, some other considerations. It got a little scary for a second. The governor vetoed House Bill 723, which would have extended that enrollment-based funding for 2023 and 2024. After he vetoed, we got word that there's going to be a temporary rule to extend enrollment funding for at least 2023. So no guarantee for 2024, but when we go to our budget subcommittees, we can budget based off of our enrollment count. So definitely a positive. And then we also got some one-time bonuses for fiscal year 22. So this current fiscal year, it's for all staff. It's based off of FTE. It's for classified, admin, certificated. And for next year, they're also going to do another round of one-time bonuses, but it will just be for instructional and pupil services.
Can I ask a question on that one?
Yeah.
So is it for all our actual FTE or for our funded FTE?
It's for our funded FTE, so it's based off of, and it's so the way the SBA funding formula works, they consider one FTE 2,080 work hours, a 260 calendar 8-hour day. And so that's what they funded us off of. And for our FTE, I mean, our classified's hourly, so I think we've done bonuses based off of, okay, what's your average work hour? So maybe a 6-hour work hour divided by 8, and we've used that kind of formula based off of for bonuses as well. We only got funded for what we can do, and we've also done several other rounds of COVID funding, classified funding. So we are going to stick with the state calculation for now.
Dr. Hawker, is that going to come to us, or is that just a pass through?
No, that has to come to you.
For board approval?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see what those dollar amounts are?
Yep.
And so they're going to be less than $1,000?
If it's less than one FTE. Yeah. And then also, the state...
on classified. Certified is
based off of their FTE. So if it's like a half contract, they'll 0.5. Yeah. And then also you'll see in that packet the way they just took a snapshot of time, and we actually have more FTE than that snapshot of time. So you'll see there is actually going to be a little bit of a based off of board approval, a general fund or ESSER contribution to fund that. All right, so now for our budget timeline. We have our exciting budget subcommittees coming up soon. So we'll have our opening meeting April 27th. We'll go over kind of what we're going to be doing with the budget subcommittees, an overview of prior years, an overview of fund balance. And then we'll meet again after a couple weeks for our revenue discussion. So we'll go over our SBA calculations, discretionary. We'll definitely there'll be a big topic about literacy this year just because of that increase. And hopefully we'll be able to have more refined calculations and some more information. Roadshow will be here tomorrow, so I'm excited for that. And then we'll have our expenditure meeting just to go over expenditure budget and then looking at what additional costs the district is looking for, just overall increases in health and welfare, just big items like that, and how it will affect our overall financials. And then on June 13th, we'll pretty much have to have the budget finalized for the hearing. So all our hard work through the budget subcommittee will be finalized and we'll present that budget hearing. And then June 20th, we'll have our budget adoption, and then we'll continue to monitor throughout the next year for any revisions from the state. So that is it for me. Thank you so much. If you have any questions.
Not yet.
All right, there will be plenty.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Great. We're going to move into the last part of our workshop where we're going to discuss lots of just different things. Dr. Hucker, do you want to introduce this and kind of give us a little bit of where we're headed in the next?
Well, sure. We're gonna be quick. I know we're down to about 30 minutes left, and I know we probably have 2 hours of conversations to have in regards to this, but I think we should just probably jump right into it. I know you've had some updates over the past little while. I know we have some new trustees as well as we continue this conversation. So I would just turn this over to the team and Ms. Barrett, and let's get rolling if that's okay.
Terrific.
Hello. Oh, there we go. Good evening, esteemed board trustees. I'm Libby Barrett, for those of you who are at home. We gathered, I think, January 21st, and kind of came to a conclusion that we needed more information from our community on high school schedules and possible alignment. And so we aim to please, and that's exactly what we did. So we invested in Thought Exchange, which gathers significant ideas and primary thoughts from our community. So we asked our community what are some things for us to consider in deciding if Coeur d'Alene High School and Lake City High School should be on the same schedule, and how to select that schedule, how to select a schedule that's best for students. We really wanted to glean, and we'll go over the idea of is it even important to our community? So we'll be discussing our community members' thoughts. We had great participation, and I'd like to take some time out right now and just thank our community. We've had forums and several surveys, and I worry their patience may be waning, and so I really appreciate anybody who participated in the survey. So let's talk about participation, the breakdown. Who was participating? We had 2,207 participants, about 1,664 thoughts, and the amazing thing is we had 43,715 ratings. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that because I thought it was similar to likes on Facebook, and it is not. So basically, Thought Exchange, this is how it works. And I'll just read you my notes. There are 3 steps. You share, you star, and you discover. So each step is equally important. But the one that helps most for conducting deep, meaningful analysis is the star rating. So when participants rate thoughts by others, they're weighing in on how important they think that topic is. So rather than the loudest voice receiving the attention of the decision makers, like likes on Facebook, the ideas that resonate most with people rise to the top of the conversation. And so we have the top 10 top thoughts for you today. Moreover, high ratings and low ratings are equally important, meaning I really like this, I really don't like this. So you can assign 5 stars to a thought, and that tells leaders, such as yourself, how strongly you support or agree with the idea being expressed. Likewise, assigning 1 star expresses strong disappointment. So comparing ideas with high and low ratings is an important part of the analysis and the results of this exchange. It helps determine for us the areas that need most attention or what the logical next steps are. So I asterisked a couple important pieces beyond that. The wisdom of the crowd, or our community, helps most of the relatable and relevant thoughts that rise to the top naturally. So it's important to understand we're not picking a winner. It's about giving the exchange leader insight into what matters most to our group, meaning our community. And it also does their best to make sure that everybody is heard. And that's another thing I wanted to send to our community. Everyone was heard in this process. So through a unique ordering of thoughts, all thoughts get the same number of views regardless of the thought's popularity. So each thought had equal number of views, and then they rise to importance. So anyway, this approach helps with prevent in-group bias, group thinking, and herding. It also makes tampering far more difficult than a traditional survey. So there's no easy way for anyone to predict the order in which we'll be seeing their thoughts. So it's very organic. So let's, now that we understand that rating piece, do you have any questions about the rating? Is a little more complicated than just thumbs up.
I played around with this a little bit, and I did like that. So Thought Exchange serves up the thoughts for you to rate. It's not you just go click on the top rated thought and give your I think that's how they get the equal views. So
yes,
I liked that because it's not like this
sampling.
got viral and it takes off kind of thing. It's
Yes.
more of everyone's looking at
But each
the
thought,
wide variety of
each thought, for instance, for example, would get 26 views. So I just think that's important because that was something that I didn't quite understand. So I wanted to break down the participation, who was involved. 57% of our parents or guardians logged on and engaged with this. 31% of our, not 57% of our students. Out of the survey participants, out of that, about 2,200, 57% were parents, 31% were students, 4% were former students, 16% were district employees, and 1% were community members not attached to any of those groups. And we just decided that if you don't have a student or you're not a teacher or you're not attached to this, we didn't get a lot of outside community input. So I don't know that it was critical to them. So which school community are you most closely affiliated with? Pretty much split down the middle. 44% of Coeur d'Alene High School participated or had an affiliation with Coeur d'Alene High School. 49% had an affiliation with Lake City High School, and then 7% neither. So we wanted to go to those top thoughts, we call them. What are some of the important things for us to consider in deciding the high school schedule, whether they should align and be the same, and how do we go about selecting that? So this is very difficult to read. So what I'll tell you is in your board packet you got all the top thoughts. For our presentation purposes, we grabbed the top 10. But you will find in the board packet and online for our community all the top thoughts if you are wanting to explore that. Again, we're just due to time constraints, we just decided to give you the top 10. But I will tell you the top key thoughts addressed here, meaning they were very important to our public, were opportunities, meaningful learning experiences, class time, these are just the topics or thoughts, concerns about student and their transition into a new system, and then that dual credit should be preserved at all costs. A lot of comments about personalized learning, and that students aren't one size fits all, and so nor should their schedule be. And that, again, students caught in the year of change, make sure that it does not affect their ability to graduate. So here's some of the questions we asked and the answers or data to the survey questions. How important is it that both high schools operate on the same class schedule? I'm going to drop down to the bottom of the screen or mid screen. 55% of our community said that it is not important. So over half. 29% felt it was somewhat important, and 16% felt that it was very important. And that was, for me, kind of the key question you were asking. How important is this to our community before we upset the apple cart, so to speak, for some, temporarily? We would all push through and be fine. If placing both high schools on the same schedule results in an overall increase, how are you feeling about that money portion? We may need to hire more teachers, and would the community support that financial increase? And 39% of our community said yes. 21% no. About 25%, a quarter of our community is unsure. And then 15, cost is not a factor. Let me go back. Did you have any, oops. Do you have any questions about that? How important is it that both high schools have the same graduation requirement? It's not important that they may be on the same one, but it is very important that they have the same graduation requirement. So 53% of our community thought that was very important. 29% somewhat, and 18% not important at all, for your consideration. And then this one addresses similar course offerings, including electives. About 50% of our community felt that was very important, a third somewhat, and about 20% not important. I feel like we're getting great guidance.
That's where it got interesting for me, because a majority don't think it's important to be on the same schedule, but a pretty large majority think it's important to have the same graduation requirements and course offerings.
I'm with you. I felt the same thing. There's some irony and disconnects, but
right.
we'll get the red thread through all this, I'm sure. So the great thing about Thought Exchange is if you are on opposite sides of the issue, it will pull common ground. And so these are the topics that whether you wanted to align or you don't want to align, whether cost is important to you or cost is not important to you, these are the things that bind us. And so again, those common ground concepts are in your board packet. We've teased out a few for you this evening. Dual credit is very important to our community. K-Tech, NIC is very important to our community. Student voice is important to our community. Meaningful learning experiences.
opportunities for advanced classes, talking about that high school experience, connection to the community, personal development is important to our community. And then there's a plea for let's make sure our community focuses on providing more opportunities for students at CHS, but not taking away from Lake City High School. Again, students, we all agree, students should be given as many opportunities as possible. And the more choice in courses, activity, club options, the better. Some more common ground is that just making sure students have a variety of classes to take. Again, more about electives that match engagement, enjoyment, and buy-in. I would call that joy for our students. A lot of common ground over opportunities. Opportunities to explore topics that they enjoy. And then this was a little different. What we have now is working. That was some common ground that surfaced. And then the suggestion to offer optional electives to Coeur d'Alene High School. This would provide equity in courses and flexibility. So our community truly believes that our students should have access to the best education we can provide. All students should have access to the same education regardless of their address. Where students live should not determine the quality of their education and course offerings. And lastly, some common ground we found in Thought Exchange was equity in educational opportunities and offerings. All students should get the best course selection and choice in what we offer to them. So again, I encourage you to look at the collective common ground and the collective top thoughts in your board packet, and this is also available on cdaschools.org. So I wanted to thank everybody in the community for participating again. I can't say that enough. And then just again, if you want all the ratings, all the comments, you can find that on our website. It's now public record. In the spirit of transparency, that's important for you all to know, at cdaschools.org. And I will stand for questions, should you have them.
This is a question you may not have an answer to today, and that's fine. But it just occurred to me the other day, how many kids do we have that want to transfer to the high school they're not zoned for through open enrollment, and how many of those kids are we able to accommodate?
As I recall, and I'm going to maybe ask Deanne Clifford to chime in, but the number is pretty equal.
Okay.
Yeah. It's equal, and we can accommodate some of them if it's a exchange, and then we cap it.
So I guess what I'm wondering is how many students want to transfer to a different high school and are unable to transfer to the other high school?
I can get that data for you, but
yeah, I don't think we both were agreeing to accept transfers, and we have.
It's in-district transfers.
Yep, in-district transfers, and our enrollment is very similar. So we were able to just one-for-one transfer.
I can repeat that. We are able to accommodate the in-district transfers mostly. And it's just our out-of-district transfers is where you get the denial because we are at or over capacity.
So as far as we know, almost all of our students that wanted to transfer from CHS to Lake City or vice versa were able to this school year?
I wouldn't say all, but most, yeah, most.
Okay.
And I was curious too, they like their culture, they like their community, so you don't have a huge crossover. People will get transfers for my parents work closer to this school, or my cousins work at or attend this school. But
And you might not have an answer to this question, but you've spent more time perusing this, and you mentioned earlier red threads. What for you right now has resonated to the top of this discussion?
I did look through the data and wrote down, and it would be a repeat, but I can, if I have time, I can go deeper, but just opportunities, meaningful learning experiences. They really are looking for that hands-on, engaging classroom experience. Sit and get. Our students and parents don't want that for their children. Class time was a red thread. And then concerns about how we transition students. And then our dual credit and K-Tech, where, please preserve that access at all costs. Of course, we would do that.
Dr. Hocker, what do you see as next steps in this? I guess I look at this data in two ways. One, I see that it's not overwhelming, I don't think either way, but there's certainly majority of our community that responded to the survey are not supportive of, or maybe not supportive, but alignment of the schedules is not important to them, but it seems like graduation requirements are. And to me, those kind of go hand in hand. Not totally, because you could have some variability in the schedules, but it seems to me that should be our focus, maybe, is away from schedules and towards graduation requirements. And I'm not sure, how that goes or what that looks like, because there's going to have to be tweaks in schedules if there's common graduation requirements, because I think right now there's 12 electives that are required at Lake City that aren't at CHS. So if you're increasing that at CHS or you're decreasing it, there's going to be some schedule changes, or just the completion time would change. Let's say you dropped it to 46 and you said, okay, it's 46 credits to graduate. At Lake City's AB schedule, a student could graduate in 3 years, taking 12 or 16 credits a year. So what do you see as next steps?
Well, thank you. This is the magic question. You've been studying this for a long time. We were all, I think, pleased with the results of this work, and I think it's key to point out what you just mentioned, Trustee Morris-Rowe, and that is that our community on one question clearly leads us to believe that this is not an importance. 55% stated that it's not an importance. However, when you start asking some of the additional questions about course opportunities you can see that that's also very heavily desired. One of the best benefits that we wanted to use this thought exchange, and it's our first one, but it will definitely not be our last, it is to try to find that middle ground, because we know that there's been some polarity between whether everybody should be on one schedule or not, or what that schedule should look like, right? But what are some of those middle ground takeaways? And Thought Exchange has helped us identify that, and that is additional course offerings. So you have an option here where at one of our high schools, Coeur d'Alene High, we're limited in our course offerings currently based upon our set graduation requirements and the schedule. So to enhance that, we need to open that door to create some additional opportunities, to create a new schedule, a different schedule that would allow students to have choice of more courses, while at the same time also valuing these other items that Thought Exchange called out, such as the ability to go to K-Tech. And you can see we've had this partnership with K-Tech ever since K-Tech's been around, and we've got 2 different high schools on 2 different schedules, and it still works. K-Tech is generally a half-a-day program, and so it's very flexible in regards to schedule. So I believe that we can honor many of those middle ground takeaways that both sides of the the raters all agree are important, and that's how I think we start moving forward and finding some wins as we go. So I think our work would be at your May board meeting. There's the plan right now to have an action item on alignment of schedules. I think you could make that decision whether or not that alignment of schedules, whether both high schools need to be on essentially a very matching schedule or not, whether that is important. And let's hypothetically say we decide that's not the key. The key is graduation requirements and course offerings. That's what we want to do. Then we can go to work to reach out. Ms. Barrett has already established much of this work in years past as principal at Coeur d'Alene High. And Mr. Reynolds is there today that can help us lead through and say, Coeur d'Alene, what works for you? What's a schedule that would work, that would increase our course offerings? And who knows, we may find a schedule that Lake City also is super happy about and would love to match everything, and everything is in alignment, and that could be okay. But perhaps that we know that that's not the key, that's not the important piece in this role. What is important is creating those opportunities. You've seen new course design or course requests coming to your board meetings. There's a desire out there for more opportunities, but every time, primarily at Coeur d'Alene High, it's a lot of sacrifice of something else, or taking a 0-hour class or something, because we don't have that course offerings with that schedule. But again, our teachers are incredible, and great learning is taking place. Our students are performing very well. And I'm confident that's what matters. It's our teachers, not so much the schedule. So I would be comfortable with whatever came out of that with that work.
So am I hearing you correct that you'd like to bring back to us in May some sort of recommendation? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, I that is correct. I think we owe it to our community. We've been asking for a lot of questions for a long time, and we need to make that decision whether alignment is going to happen or not. That should be a vote and essentially decided. No matter what you decide, if you did decide that yes, we want to align, that we just want both schedules, we want equal opportunities for all kids in the district. We also know that's not going to take place this next fall. It would be at best a year away, and that would give ample time to do that work. But in my first example, where we said, okay, alignment is not the driving factor, our community has told us that, then but course offerings is something that everybody agrees is important. What can we do? Let's let our teachers and administrators come to work and share with us their plans, perhaps, to create those additional opportunities.
Would it be safe to say, because one of those top things was the transition, I think at this point it would be safe to say that no matter what happens, we would help students through that transition, and that's not,
absolutely,
that's if we can.
No, we're not going to magically increase any graduation requirements to Coeur d'Alene.
We've done that in lots of other ways, whether that be boundaries or whatever, and helping.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's a built-in process.
Charts, all the conversion charts, all the things, that we can assure our community is going to be key. So. Yep.
And you saw that was one of the highlights too.
Right.
Please
so
don't mess up.
So I just want to call that out right now, that anxiety we can put a little bit more to rest.
I agree.
So, okay. So Dr. Harker, what else do you need from us then right now?
Well, what we need is we just need you've got a couple of weeks before your May board meeting, so we need the door open for you to disseminate this information that you've received, and feel free to reach out and ask questions so that you will be comfortable in making a decision in a couple of weeks at your May board meeting. That's really the task. Again, I greatly appreciate this opportunity for this workshop, and that we told our community that we were going to broadcast this workshop, so we wanted to make sure we broadcast this workshop. The plan moving forward is to have a true roundtable workshop scenario. It's important, I think, that we're all around the same table and doing that work, and that's our plan. Workshops generally won't be video recorded because it's a workshop. We'll continue to do that at our board meetings, but we want to have an opportunity for you to sit around, see each other, look each other in the eye, and really have that engagement. And today was much more of a presentation. And there's been a lot on your plate. This was a big board workshop with lots of topics. This is a big topic, and we've really only spent about 30 minutes, and we probably plan to spend closer to an hour specifically on this. But we want to be mindful of your 6 o'clock kind of end time. So Ms. Barrett did great in speeding up an hour presentation to a half an hour.
I did. I want to thank you for your thoughtful questions. It makes the process easier, and we're more able to serve. So thank you.
I guess I'd just also like to say to the community, thank you for continuing to engage in this conversation. I think if it wasn't important, we wouldn't keep having it. We do want to get to a spot where we move on. But obviously we've been having this conversation for 20 years now. So we're going to land somewhere. So thank you all for your engagement and your thoughtfulness, and appreciate it. So, all right. With that then, tonight's workshop is adjourned. Thank you.